I'll give you a little background on my amendment pertaining to the now stopping of the stocking of muskies statewide. Basically, that's what the amendment is. It's very short, to the point. In 2007, when I first came to the Senate, Madam President, members, of course, I've been involved with the Environmental Natural Resource Committee since the day I came here, and the interest and the excitement about muskie fishing in 2007 certainly was at the forefront. The DNR was charged with putting together a DNR muskie stocking plan because there were people that wanted an additional fisheries in the state of Minnesota where they could actually have that experience of catching a very large fish. As you know, the muskie has become I guess it hasn't become, but it is a very large hybrid fish that has some native lakes in the state of Minnesota. Actually, 44 lakes in the state of Minnesota. But they wanted to have more. And since 2007 and 8, the state, the way I understand it, has been stocking those lakes and has done so repeatedly every year. I might also add that the stocking on Lake Mille Lacs still continues, even though we have a fish population, a walleye population problem there. It appears that the DNR, through testimony on several committees, fisheries experts say that muskie really make no difference on walleye. Well, members, there has been a social change that's been brought to my attention over the last couple of years in Minnesota, and especially in my area. And my area is in Otter Tail County. There were several lakes that were stocked there, and the associations there now have been looking at this, and I have actually a list of cities and actually 2 counties now that have resolutions asking the governor, asking the DNR to stop the stocking in light of the fact that there's 25 to 30% of the state's water fisheries now that have muskies. The bill does allow them to continue to stock the existing lakes that have been stocked, and one would wonder, why would you continue to stock muskies? And the reason is, in fairness of the fish does not propagate. It does not do real well in some lakes, and some unnatural lakes. I'm going to have to be very honest with you, members. 4 years ago, I would not have brought this bill forward because of the excitement yet, I think, of the muskie fishermen in the state of Minnesota. I just would not have done that. There has been a social change, and there's folks out there that are saying, maybe the DNR needs to go back to the table. Maybe we need to see some science on the other side of the table. In fact, 2 years ago, or maybe it was last year, we actually raised the minimum limit of the muskie to be able to take a muskie in Minnesota from 48 inches all the way to 54 inches. Members, that's a 6-inch increase in 1 year. Now, I will tell you that the DNR plan did not agree with that, and they'll tell you that they only wanted 2 inches added onto the 48, which would have been obviously 50 inches. They had a progression that they wanted to go through, and that was in their fishing muskie plan. Again, getting back to the social aspects, there has been a real discussion on, we think maybe there shouldn't be any more stocking. I've got lake associations now in my area that are saying we're no longer going to stock walleyes in our lakes until the DNR starts to listen. Those of you that know me know that I have spoken on behalf of the DNR and supported the DNR many, many times in this body. So I don't take this lightly. But I do really, truly believe the DNR is not listening to the social aspects of this. They may think they know the science of this particular issue, but there are a bunch of folks out there that pay the bills that are saying, maybe we need to go back to the table, we need to stop the stocking, and take a good look at this. I might give you a comparison to the amount of fishermen we're talking about here that actually fish muskies, and I don't think there's anybody that's ever dropped a line in this chamber that wouldn't love to catch a 45 or a 50-inch fish. I mean, it would be really exciting. It really would. But the amount of fishing the amount of licenses sold to muskie folks in the state of Minnesota is a very small percentage, roughly 10, and some say as high as 14% that actually fish muskies. Well, that leaves an awful lot of folks in the state of Minnesota that simply want to come to the lake on the weekend with their grandkids, and they want to catch a crappie, they want to catch a sunfish, they want to catch the state fish, of course, everybody wants to catch a walleye. And they happen to think that when they see these big muskies coming out of these waters, that they're actually hurting the population of these other game fish. The DNR says no, they're not. Let me be specific about Lake Mille Lacs. I don't know a whole lot about that. That's really not a fight. But you know, folks, this is really not a local fight. This is a statewide issue. This is a nonpartisan issue. I did talk to the author about this, and John agrees. You don't go into a bait store and you have Democrat hooks over here and you have Republican hooks over here. It just doesn't happen. But Mille Lacs in particular has a shortage of walleye, and it's a very big concern. Also, and I just want you to think about this, also the reports of the DNR is that there are no forage fish left. The fish that actually muskies like, the perch and the whitefish. The whitefish are fish that actually are eaten by not only muskies but also northerns. And they're also eaten by walleyes. Well, if there's no forage fish, and the DNR is telling us all that the walleyes that are being stocked or that are growing in Mille Lacs are turning around and they're eating they're cannibalizing their own fish, yet the DNR is not willing to admit that muskies, a 54 or a 50 or even a 49-inch muskie, makes no appreciable difference on the amount of walleyes in Mille Lacs. They're just simply not willing to listen to that. When you talk about science, science is very important. I don't know those of you that may or may remember Dr. Peter Sorensen. Dr. Peter Sorensen still is employed at the University of Minnesota. Some years ago, we spent literally millions of dollars to upgrade the invasive species portion of the University of Minnesota, where he actually heads up, and we had him kind of directed at looking at these flying carp that are coming up the river. And he's doing a tremendous job. Some refer to him as the doctor of fish. So you can imagine how many times that I deal with him in my committees that I sit on. I see him a lot. I asked him a question, members, and this is kind of interesting. I asked him a question less than 2 months ago. The Red River Basin, are you familiar with the Red River Basin? He replied that he was. The Red River Basin, if you will, is from Bemidji straight down and west. If you draw a line straight down from Bemidji on west, most of that water runs to the Red River. He says, yes, I'm very familiar with the Red River Basin. I said, would you think it would be a good idea to introduce any species that's not native to the Red River Basin into any waters that run into the Red River? He said, absolutely not. Now, I didn't specify muskies, but he says that basin is so stressed that it should not have any other species introduced into that basin. Members, the DNR has been stocking a lot of walleyes in the Red River Basin, or excuse me, a lot of muskies in the Red River Basin. To the tune of about, members, I don't have a fiscal note on this because it's a reversal. Quite frankly, it costs, we're spending about, the DNR spending just a little over $500,000 every year stocking muskies that pertain to their muskie program. In contrast, you should also know that on the average, the last 10 years, the state of Minnesota, the DNR has been spending $3,651,000 on walleyes. Now, that does not include lake associations. So you can see the importance of what the DNR has put towards muskies, spending that amount of money on a very small amount of lakes. And frankly, there's a lot of folks in the state of Minnesota that think maybe we've got enough now, it's time to stop, it's time to regroup, go back to the drawing board, look at the science, let's talk about what does a 54-inch muskie, which is brand new to the fishing community, what does a 54-inch muskie consume to get to 54 inches? We don't know that. Members, my bill is very clear, straightforward. It stops the DNR from any further stocking until the legislature comes together with new science and we move forward if they so choose. So very straightforward, and I'll stand for any questions.
Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam President. I would just like to object to this amendment on the grounds that it is not germane to the bill. We did hear this bill in the Game and Fish Subcommittee. It was passed without recommendation to the full Energy and Environment Committee. Without getting into the other side of the discussion, I would just like to challenge the germaneness of the amendment. Thank you.
Advice? Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam President, very clearly, advice to the President. If you look on page 1 of the the Bill 2793, the bill that Senator Marty has brought forward, you will go down to line 121 and you'll see Game and Fish rules, and you go down to the next line and you'll see 97.A. You see the amendment, my amendment, does refer to that. Members and Madam President, there's a lot of Game and Fish language in Senator Marty's bill. I don't think it's even disputable that this is whether it's germane or not. It certainly has a lot to do with it. If you also go to page 5, you'll see drain plugs, bailers, live wells, bilges. That's talking about fishing boats, Madam President. So this is a Game and Fish issue, and that's exactly what my amendment talks about, is 97A.
Senator Marty.
Madam President, the changes in the bill that he's referring to are related to invasive species, not game and fish, and his is amending Chapter 97C, and this bill is largely Chapter 84, 84D. It's a different purpose if we want to spend the day on game and fish things. I think there are a lot of amendments people might be trying, but I think it is a different purpose. It's game and fish, and the bill itself was dealing with invasive species and other provisions, policy and technical provisions of the DNR.
Senator Latz.
Madam President, although Senator Ingebrigtsen did say his amendment involved 97A, it actually does involve 97C, and which is in general the fishing statutes. However, the sections 97C to .01 to .087, which would be covered by the amendment, are not found anywhere in the bill. That's the section of 97C that addresses fishing habitat. The only reference to 97C in the bill has to do with the invasive species issues. So nothing in the bill at all addresses fishing habitat.
Madam President.
Senator Han.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the majority can decide what they want to have in a bill or what they don't want to have in a bill, but we can just vote on this. I mean, this is a bill that deals with this issue. I think it's kind of a stretch to say, well, we can't have this particular amendment because it's not specifically referred to in the bill. I think tomorrow we're going to have a bill that has everything but the kitchen sink on it, and we're going to say that's all good and great that we have a bill that has all kinds of stuff in it, and to say we can't have an amendment, or we can't even vote on an amendment that deals with muskies in this bill. I mean, if you don't like it, just vote no. But why can't we at least have a vote?
Senator Senjum. More advice.
Madam Chair, this is, in my mind, not even questionable in terms of germaneness. It's totally germane. I mean, look at line 121, game and fish rules. You know, look at line 124. We want to talk about section 97C. There it is. It talks about setting open seasons and areas, and that's what he's talking about. This is totally germane, Madam Chairman. I can imagine that you would rule in favor of the motion that, in fact, it's not germane. It is germane, exactly so, and certainly would urge you to let this amendment continue to be discussed.
Senator Westrom.
Madam President, advice.
State your advice.
Madam President, specifically to the issue at hand, this amendment certainly fits right in with the bill and the topics in the bill. Just as of recent as yesterday, we had an elections bill with a big amendment that was added to it that was found germane by you, Madam President, dealing with felons and restoring election and voting rights of felons in a bill that was widely expanded when we added that amendment. I realize that amendment yesterday brought a lot of additional controversy and discussion to the bill, but that was no reason to not allow it. Senator Marty's advice to you just minutes ago was that if we want to bring up a lot of discussion, then that would be a reason not to allow this. Madam President, the fact that this amendment may or may not bring additional discussion should not be part of the consideration, as Senator Marty offered you under his advice. It does fit into the bill. Like yesterday, if there's additional discussion, that's fine. Senator Hand's advice, the proper way to handle it is voted up or voted down, and it either gets added into the bill, like yesterday's felon voting got added into the election bill, or it gets voted down and then it's not added in. So I would urge your advice to be that it is germane, it does fit into this bill, and that certainly these topics are covered in this bill, just like elections were covered yesterday in the felon voting that was found an amendment to be germane.
More advice? I'm sorry. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to speak. I don't often stand up to give advice on these issues, but the reality of it is, if this issue is not germane because the primary purpose of the bill is to deal with invasive species, indeed, if we're attempting to introduce muskies into lakes where they are not native, what is it but an invasive species?
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam President. To the germaneness, Senator Weber brings up a really good point here, and this has been part of the discussion, as this is an invasive species. I frankly don't look at it as an invasive species. Now, we could argue all day long on that. However, when you talk about the Red River Basin, it being introduced there as not a native fish, I guess it is certainly an invasive species. But we also talk about in line 1.4, where you talk about civil penalties. I don't know if you folks know this or not, but this is the only game fish in the state of Minnesota that actually, I believe, that does have a civil penalty if you take it out of season or if you take one that's not of the minimum limit. So this, 97C is on line 124. I mean, this, if anything pertains to game and fish, this bill certainly is it, Madam President.
Thank you all for the advice. I'm ready to rule. The President rules that the A3 amendment is germane. Any more discussion on the A3 amendment? Senator Gazelka. You're about to overturn the ruling of the President, Senator Gazelka?
No. Madam President,
Go right ahead.
Not for muskies. So, Madam President, I have the A50 amendment.
Wait, we haven't voted on this yet.
Well, I have the A50 amendment to the amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Secretary will report the amendment to the amendment.
Senator Gazelka moves to amend the Ingebrigtsen amendment to Senate File Number 2793 as follows. Page 1, line 4, and this is the A50 amendment.
Senator Gazelka.
Madam President and members, seeing that Gull Lake up in my area is probably the next lake that the DNR would stock with muskies, you can imagine that this is a hot topic in my area. I can tell you that the Lake Association, about 75% said they did not want to stop muskies. And yet, I'm great friends with Al Linder and Ron Linder and all the fishing legends that say the science says that this is not a problem. So I'm sitting right in the middle of these two people, and I've met with the commissioner of the DNR and sat down with him and heard what they're trying to do. And there is no easy, simple solution. But it comes down to what if they're wrong for me. And the amendment simply says that Senator Ingebretsen's total moratorium forever is limited to the next 4 years. So the moratorium is until, I believe it was August 1st, 2020. They took my amendment. But it's a 4-year moratorium. And the reason why I have that in there is because if the science shows that the muskies are not a problem, then we should be moving forward. We've stocked a bunch of lakes already, so we can look at those lakes and follow them. And so my amendment to his simply says the moratorium is not forever. And I'd appreciate a green vote. Senator
Ingebretsen.
Thank you, Madam President. And members, I would consider this a friendly amendment, and here's the reasons why. As you can probably tell, according to my discussion, that again, this is not a partisan issue. Again, I spent time yesterday with Governor Dayton and Commissioner Landwehr. We actually talked about compromise. Would we be willing to do some sort of a compromise? Frankly, at that point in time, I thought the compromise would be let's end the stocking and bring it back to the legislature for discussion, and if the legislature thinks we should move forward, I'll sign on to that bill. I just will. But I think this is a great compromise. Senator Marty, I hope you speak in favor of this. It brings the discussion to the table, and we can continue to move forward with whether we should or not, and the social issues on this fish.
Any more discussion? Senator Clausen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this would be a question for either Senator Gazalka or Senator Ingebretsen. And I've been listening to this discussion, and this is an important issue for the history of Minnesota and our fishing legacy, and it's concerning. The question I would have is, as I understand Senator Ingebretsen's testimony, he's looking for a moratorium on the stocking of muskies. Senator Gazalka is looking at limiting that. I'm wondering, they both refer to studies, and I'm wondering, are there any ongoing studies currently that are in place to really look at this issue so that we have a definite outcome of the direction that we should take as a state? So that would be my question. Thank you.
Senator Gazalka.
Thank you, Madam President. Senator Clausen, I saw quite a bit of data, but I wasn't convinced that it was enough time frame to prove that it was so. So I think they'll continue to get data. They'll continue to monitor what's happening. For example, do the muskies actually eat the same feeder fish that the walleyes eat? Do they eat walleyes? I think that answer is generally no. But I want to follow that data and let the science direct where we go. But for me personally, I just don't think that there's enough data yet, because once we make that decision, it's going to dramatically impact a lake like Gull Lake and all the lakes it's connected to.
Is there any more discussion? Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam President. Will Senator Ingebretsen yield?
He will yield. Senator Hoffman.
Senator Ingebretsen, thank you for bringing this topic up. I'm a little confused when you talked about the cannabis of the fish, eating the fish. I'm wondering what study you're referring to, and if you could please elaborate, other than the Myers study or the Knapp study that's out there, what study are you talking about that has empirical evidence? Thank you.
Can we keep the noise down? It's getting a little out of control. Senator Ingebretsen.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Senator, for that question. I know there is a Knapp study that was done, but what I said earlier, and I guess I can answer both questions, Madam President, at the same time. The DNR has done studies on fish and fish consumption and what actually is inside the stomach of fish. That's how they figure out what they eat. They know that they eat primarily the popcorn of the muskies certainly is the tulipi, as well as also reported by the commissioner, perch. Now we all know that, and maybe we don't know this, that walleye is actually of the perch family. Now I might be speaking a little out of school here, but nevertheless it's the same type of fish. Doesn't get quite as big, but there's a lot more of them. They're more prolific. They produce and reproduce more. And Senator, so I don't have any studies that I can refer to, but the whole issue kind of points to that we really need to do this.
Sorry, Senator Ingebrigtsen, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm very distracted by the noise that's going on back here. If you guys could take your conversations somewhere else. And also, staff members, please take your conversations, unnecessary conversation, off the floor. And members, if you must talk, could you please talk quietly? Thank you. Please give Senator Ingebrigtsen the courtesy so we can all hear him. Thank you. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I think it just begs the whole discussion that we need to look at this when you have Dr. Peter Sorensen, who is heading up the University of Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species, who comes and testifies that we should not be introducing any species that is not native to a river basin. And I specifically talked about the Red River Basin because I'm part of that. I'm actually in the Red River Basin. So that, along with counties in Washington County, Otter Tail County, commissioners that are coming forward and saying we don't think that we want these in our county anymore, in our lakes, in our streams. I think it begs us to get not only look at the DNR study, but let's take some time and look at a different study. And again, to both you senators that asked the question, if the evidence is there and it's brought back to this body, I'll be the first one to sign on.
Any more discussion? Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Madam President, and thank you, Senator Ingebrigtsen, for your response. I'm wondering if Senator Rood would yield for a question.
Senator Rood, will you yield? She will yield. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you. Senator Rood, I believe there was some discussion about fish that were trailing or following along boats, and in an anecdotal report that you had, that you had visually saw the walleye and the muskie that were actually in the same waters, and it goes in line, Madam President, with the study that Knapp did, saying that they're both predatory fish. And so, Senator Rood, I wonder if you could give us an explanation of just what you saw when you were up on Mille Lacs and the walleye and the muskie that were together while you were trailing.
Senator Rood.
Madam President and Senator Hoffman, I have been muskie fishing. It's pretty exciting. We have you don't catch walleye or muskies very often, and when we have what we call trails, we get excited. The muskie trail your bait right up to the boat. They're very hard to catch. When you catch a 45 or 54-inch muskie, typically you don't catch them or keep them because they're such a magnificent fish. And most people will have trophies made from them. They'll take a picture and then they'll have a mount made out of them because you don't eat them, you just admire them, and it's a phenomenal sport. What I'll tell you about muskies is in 2008, we put together a long-range plan for muskies and large northerns. And it received a lot of input from the state of Minnesota, a lot of public input. It outlined a compromise between those who wanted muskies in the lakes and those that didn't. And the plan called for 8 new lakes to be named and to be stocked. And so far, 3 have been stocked, and they've been really immensely successful in doing that. So now we have 5 more that need to be done by the year 2020. And the DNR has looked at 5 lakes, and they looked at the biology of those 5 lakes, and they've taken input on those lakes. They haven't made any decisions yet. They're still in the process. I will tell you that they have taken over 1,800 comments in the comment period. They've had over 83 public hearings. They have heard from lake associations. They have heard from local units of government. And they're still listening to them because they haven't made the decisions on those lakes. One lake, Big Marine, they just took out because they decided it wasn't appropriate. Maybe the biology and maybe the muskies wouldn't survive and thrive there. So they're still looking at it. They've taken 1,500 online comments. They've taken 242 email comments, phone calls. They are really working hard on this issue. We told them that this is what we wanted to do in the state of Minnesota, and they've been very responsive in doing that. There are many, many studies done on muskies. You can see the DNR has a list of all the studies that have been done on their habitat, what they do to the lake, what they eat, how they affect other species. Many studies have been done. I think the science is there to do this. I think we need to allow the DNR to go forward with this and not, I do know that the lake associations are very important. They're the heart and soul of every lake in Minnesota. They take care of the lakes, they cherish them, their property values are on there, so we do need to listen to their voice. But I would ask you to please let the DNR go forward with their proposals and bring it to the end. They're still having meetings with their local units of government. You know, there's been a lot of talk about how muskies affect a lake, and we look at Lake Vermilion, and we look at Leech Lake, and we look at Little Boy, and we have many, many lakes around the state where muskies and walleye coexist and thrive, and they're some of the best fisheries in the state of Minnesota. The DNR has studied the impact to 7 different species: crappies, bluegills, ciscoes, northern pike, walleye, yellow perch, white sucker, in 41 Minnesota lakes. And after muskies have been introduced or in the lakes, and there has been absolutely no impact on those lakes. And I just think that we should let the DNR do their job. We have the information, we have the science. You can all go online and look at it. One of the things in my area that I look at is muskie fishing. Usually occurs in August to November. That's the best time. Those are the times when my resorts have trouble filling their rooms, and the lake is less busy, and so it brings a lot of tourism dollars to our lakes during those times when it's a downtime. So I don't think it competes for the lake for the people that just want to go for a leisurely sunny stroll and catch a few panfish. We've heard stories. I've seen that the story has been around. A newspaper article from 1984 is being used as the big proof that muskies bite your grandchildren's toes, and that's not true. And so I just ask you to allow the DNR to do their job and oppose this amendment.
Any more discussion on the A50 amendment to the amendment? Senator Marty.
Point of order.
Point of order. Take your point of order. Senator Latz.
Madam President, what amendment are we on? I thought it was the amendment to the amendment, which is only a sunset provision.
That's the amendment we are on, the A50 amendment to the A3 amendment, and it is it's a date extension. Right. Is there any discussion then on the A50 amendment? Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam President. And folks, this is kind of why we bring this stuff up, and this is why it's been brought forward. I understand that there was an excitement at one time. There's no question about that. And Senator, you're very accurate. There were a lot of public meetings at that time. The interest in muskies back then was certainly there. But I'm here to tell you, as I told the governor and Tom Landwehr, Commissioner Landwehr, and I've told him several times, that interest is not so much anymore. The interest is fine in the lakes that have been stocked. Also included in the 25% of the lakes in Minnesota that are supposedly stocked with muskies, what's not included is Lake of the Woods. Well, that's a pretty large body of water. A lot of good muskie experiences up there, as well as the Mississippi River. So sometimes what I'm hearing and what I'm finding is the DNR may have a little bit of a public relations problem here of just really how many lakes do we have that are stocked. When we talk about fishermen, the economic driver here, what you're not also including is how many people are going past Alexandria and Fargo and going to the Devil's Lake area because they have a tremendous fishery of walleye. Folks, generally, The majority of the folks are after other fish, not just the muskie. The majority of your fishermen want other game fish. Now, it sounds like I'm a walleye hater. I am not a a muskie hater. But again, the social issues, the social aspects are there. They're changing. The folks are leaving here. They're going to Canada. And quite frankly, some of the lakes that have been stocked with muskies, and those that are interested in this know that the DNR turns right around and stocks walleyes in the same lake. And some of the people on the lake think, well, here comes the DNR now. They're starting to feed the muskies again. You know, if the science isn't even there for that, the science is just not there. The people don't believe that anymore. They just don't believe that they don't eat walleye and they don't eat the other game fish. And that's why I think we need to do something here, and this amendment to the amendment is good.
Any more discussion on the amendment to the amendment? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. No. Motion prevails. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. Now we have before us the A3 amendment. Senator Marty.
Madam President, thank you. I was going to say I didn't have a fish in this fight, but I don't envy the DNR. They've got a tough job here, and I don't think anyone could express it better than Senator Ruud did. The DNR has been looking at the science of this. They've been going through it thoroughly. They've had an incredible public comment period. They've continued to go around and ask. They're continuing to do so. We've gotten a decent number of emails and calls from people on both sides of it. I think the reality is, and sometimes we hear from those who are most vocal, obviously, but the reality is what Senator Ruud said is right. The DNR is trying to do a good job and trying to balance competing interests. I think they're looking at the science of it. I think they deserve to have their process gone through. That's why we ask them to take a look at these things. That's why we ask them to get the public input. I just want to say what Senator Ruud said was exactly right on. Urge you to oppose the amendment.
Any more discussion? Senator Westrom.
Madam President, members, I would urge you to support Senator Ingebrigtsen's amendment here. And to be real clear, this amendment doesn't, it just simply restricts or tells the DNR don't continue to stock this as this issue is becoming more controversial. It doesn't limit the current lakes that are already being stocked or have been stocked. And so I think this is a reasonable approach to just say no more new lakes at this point in time. There's certainly dozens of lakes already that have been and will continue to be the muskie havens for those that enjoy that type of fishing. This just says no more at this point in time, and so I just wanted to be clear on that so members knew what we're talking about.
Is there any more discussion on the A3 amendment? Then, Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam President. Real quickly to the science of the DNR. DNR has got a tough job. There's no question about that. But let's remember when we had 5 tags issued for whitetail. That was also a DNR study that was done. Now, I think people have heard the folks were very angry about that. Now we're going through some years where we don't have any whitetail or we have very few. Not always, folks, is the DNR studies that clear and that good. Just a point. Thank you.
Okay, on the A3 amendment, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. No. President's in doubt. Division. All those in favor of the A3 amendment, please stand. I was hoping someone would.
Is this yes to stop? This is to stop.
Motion before the body is the A3 amendment. In favor are standing. All right, you may be seated. There were 40 ayes. The motion does prevail. The amendment is adopted.